joining our show. We appreciate it a lot. So
Glad to be here, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start off. Cheers. You have a little salute.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Chin, 100 years, gentlemen.
There we go.
Oh, look at that. He's got the nice little brandy cup over there, too.
Ooh, try to keep it empty.
Yeah.
That's not that bad. This doesn't have a lot of heat, though.
No, it's got a little, almost peanut butter, a little bit in it.
I know it tastes like that.
I taste some like nut notes.
Yeah, it's the cinnamon and the apple.
Mm-hmm. It's fusion series.
It's definitely simple.
Yeah. Let it get a little air in it. This bad boy's going to be beautiful.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for joining us. And, our podcast is How to Business. And one of the reasons, we wanted to bring you on here was, how to start a business. And a lot of folks that are soon to want to get in to open up their business or start a business have a lot of questions. And with your experience and your background, I think you could probably help out a lot of folks. So thanks again for coming in and joining us.
Absolutely.
I know one of the things I want to touch on real quick was, you said that you had a true love of the art of business and helping people connect. Can you expand a little bit on that and tell us what that means to you about connecting people in the business force?
Yeah, sure. I've been a bit of a serial entrepreneur my whole life since early on, and learned the hard way, PhD in the street, so to speak, on businesses. So a lot of the things that I like to do now that over the years, I've gotten more informed, because when I started, you could have filled the ocean with everything I didn't know.
Right.
And some of it was blind luck, and I just didn't know any better, and I succeeded where I really shouldn't have. And then over a course of time, I got a more full sense of myself, which was always a bad thing. And thought I knew more than I did as I graduated up the food chain of businesses in terms of revenue, employees, and all the regulatory. So one of the things that I'm excited about with business brokerage, business advisory, and real estate, and the reason I'm re-entering the entrepreneurial world and leaving the corporate world, because my world's kind of started upside down. I did the entrepreneur thing first, then went corporate, and then leaving corporate to go entrepreneur. And typically your corporate guys leave about 40, 45, and they've saved up some money. They've got, a little, nest egg, and they want to go start a business. So for me, a lot of what we do in general in our space, Sam, and you're the same way, sometimes it's talking people out of going into business, or they pick a business that they think just because it's a hot market that, oh, I need to get into this business, without really looking at that picture in totality. And they go in undereducated and underinformed about the space. And then it's just a comedy of errors after that. Right. And so a lot of what we do at Platinum North, and what I endeavor to do, is really pressure test motivation, pressure test their willingness to learn about the industry that they're entering in or embarking into, or if they're really in it and they know their space very well, how pertinent and relevant is the information and hard skill sets they have. Because in our world, as you know, right, it's very dynamic, and the world and the business landscape changes very quickly. Your general client, customer, consumer, their attention span's very short. And that's a byproduct of how we market in any industry, in any given field. And we're all consumers of something, right? And we all consume products, buy products. Some of those are motivational. It might be emotion driven, like a home or a car or a plane or a boat. Some of those are aspirational. All of those things are. You can get into watches and jewelry shops. Some are, passion plays, want to open a yoga studio, want to open a gym, want to open a local bar because I like to drink and I think I'd be great at it.
Yeah, everyone wants to open a restaurant.
Yeah. So the passion I have really, it just comes from a standpoint of I've walked in the shoes, and if I can help anyone, save some of the missteps early on, then I've already won.
Right.
And then we also get clients that come to us that are mid-stage or maturing stage of business. And in those situations, that's more of a consulting activity where maybe they're bumping up against growth. And you run into this in large corporations all the time. And then they're looking for alternative ways to grow, maximize their growth, but grow in a way that the economics still make sense, because growth for growth's sakes isn't any good.
Right.
Your growth has to be profitable. And if you're growing and your sales are increasing and you're not making profit, you just punched a ticket to cash flow issues. And then you're, a few stages away from insolvency.
Well, let me ask you this. So you're right. I think we've seen so many times everybody has a passion or a dream and they want to get into business and they think that, they're going to get rich and this is it. I've owned multiple businesses and we've won and we've lost and we've had all those trials, right? So let's just bring it back to the very core basics. Let's say I have a business and I want to start and I want to open it. What would be the first thing you would recommend me to do if I want to open up a business? Whether it's e-commerce, commodity driven, retail, it doesn't matter, just business in general. What would you recommend?
So typically the avenues most people go down is you can either buy an existing business that's already up and running. You can start a business from scratch that's in a field that's already established. So you're not having to educate the consumer about a brand new product. Or you typically go the franchise route and you buy a franchise. It's basically a business in a box and you're sold, standard operating procedures. You're sold all your market drivers, your metrics, your revenue, your how many square feet you need, how many chillers, coolers, all of that. So in each of those three spaces, the very first thing for me, when I sit down with someone who's wanting to buy a business, sell a business, or go into business for themselves, is to really get down to the why. Because no matter what you do, when you start a business, you have to have a greater why. If
Right.
you don't really know why you got into the business, why you formed it, what specifically with very granular clarity your goals are for the business, your likelihood of success is very low. And it's low to begin with because the statistics really don't lie. I mean, most businesses, about a quarter businesses that start fail within the first 2 years. About half of the businesses fail within 5, and about 75% fail between years 8 and 10.
Mm-hmm.
So that's for businesses that theoretically make it out of the gate from a startup or conception. They actually roll in and they develop customers, they develop clients, they grow some revenue. Even those companies, right, where you think you've won because you're 3 years into a business, don't really make it by the time you get to the 5th year, 7th year, 8th, 10th year. Yeah. And most businesses, if you think about it, that a smaller business person is going to start, is going to be a service-based business, a restaurant, a retail outlet. People that get into manufacturing, big industrial, intellectual property, R&D, those people typically came out of a bigger corporation and they were, engineers, designers, R&D people, chemists, that go out and start their own little compounding labs and these type things. So the first thing is to really ask yourself why I want to do this. And you really have to dig down into that question and figure that out. Once you go from there, there's some pitfalls that most everybody falls into, right? One of the weirdest things, which is the easiest thing in the world to do, a lot of people start a business and there's no business plan. And you don't need, a tome. You don't need a 100-page business plan. Some of the best business plans laid are one-pagers. And they're cogent, they're salient, and you literally, and there's some guys out there, there's not many, but there's a handful of guys creeping around the planet that do one-page business plans for large corporations. And they can literally walk you through it. And you sit back and they got all of that on one page. Mm-hmm. So that's a big piece. So the business planning process, if you're talking about, okay, what do I need to start a business? Well, I need to know why I want to get in the space. And I need to know what's driving me and what's going to keep me in it, right? Other than just making money, because the making money part is a byproduct of the processes and the management that you imbibe into the company. It's just that simple. People talk about cultures and vision statements and all these platitudes, but culture is just a derivative. It's a byproduct of management. How you manage is the culture that it creates. You don't take a culture and then overlay it in bad management and say, I've got a culture. It just doesn't work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you talk about your kind of non-traditional route, entrepreneur, corporate, back into the entrepreneurial space. What was your why when you got started?
Well, mine was a little bit of survival. My first business was a lotion stand in Honolulu, Hawaii. And I was 17 years old.
I know what my why would be with that.
So yeah. And I literally, fellows, knew nothing about business. I was good at math, but I had never cracked an accounting book.
So hold on, I want to back up real quick. I don't mean to cut you off. A lotion stand. Well, first off, where'd you get lotion? Where'd you get the lotion product from?
So this is crazy. So I go to Hawaii with 3 of my buds, right? Graduation trip. I'm 17. We're supposed to go over for 2 weeks and do a little surf adventure. But in the back of my mind, I was running away from home. So I took $7,500 that I had saved up with me in one big bag. We got there, 3 people went back and I stayed. So I'm in Honolulu, Hawaii, and literally I don't have a place to live. 17. And I go to like one of these little, I think it was called like find a roommate places. Literally, it's like in Hawaii we're talking about, this is the 80s, like 86, 87. So they had mixed use way back in the day where you had condos on the top and retail on the bottom, way back in the day when Japan was taking over the world. So at any rate, I went there to a room finder place and literally it was a chalkboard and people are sitting in this little lobby and you put your name up looking for a roommate, male or female. I find this guy, literally his name's Don Johnson.
I got to look.
Johnson.
In the 80s, dude, that guy was like famous.
Oh yeah. And Don, just to give you an image, right? He's kind of a big, tall, curly hair, blonde guy, muscled up, got out of the Air Force and he was at Hickam Air Force Base. And he decided to stay in Hawaii when he got out of the Air Force. And I met him. So he turned out, he was my roommate and he was working as a bartender in this club called the Jazz Cellar. And he got me a job as a bar back working with him at this place called the Jazz Cellar, which was downtown Waikiki. And the guy owned 2 clubs. He owned another one called Silly's in Pearl Ridge, which was like 25, 30 minutes north. And the guy turned out to be the old show Magnum PI. The helicopter pilot, Roger Mosley, owned both of these bars. So that's kind of my claim to fame. I was like, okay, this is great. I'm working for the black dude that flies the helicopter.
Yeah.
And Tom Selleck had a restaurant called the Orchid in Hawaii Kai on the other side. But the long and the short, met Don. We became roommates. I was bar backing, and the security guard was this big Samoan dude named Fa'a Tuosi Popo. He was big guy, played football at UH. His grandmother made lotions.
Okay.
Right. And so, we talking and hanging out. I'm at the Royal Hawaiian Shopping Center and there's this kiosk, those little 8-foot by 10-foot little things that fold down. And it said, for lease on the kiosk. And I'm like, lotions, kiosk, I like and this is literally right off the beach, right? Halekulani Hotel's not far from there. So anyway, I was like, so Fa, can I get those lotions? Right. And he said, yeah, he's like, yeah, I'll take care of you, Holly boy. So the rent on the kiosk was $2,000 a month. I had a grand total of $7,500. This was my business plan.
Yeah. Better make it work quick.
And I was like, yeah, I could do this. I'll bar back at night. I'll work the lotion stand in the daytime. All I need is some lotion. Right. And, it had its own little cash register and a little plug in. And I'm thinking, in my mind, I was thinking all I have to pay for is the kiosk, right? That was literally it. So I got, we got some little bottles and I did the little thing and it was, called Waikiki Aloy and it's all cool. And this was mostly Japanese tourists at the time, right? Because they spent 4-to-1 over California tourists. So I made these little scripts in Japanese, little sales scripts, and it had Kyoko, my girlfriend's roommate at Chaminade, do the Japanese. So when they came up, I could go, I had like, Ohayou gozaimasu, watashi wa何をdesu, right? So I get a little bit of Japanese under my belt. I'm tan. I got the long surfer hair. I look like golden bronze back in the day.
What more do you need?
So that's how it started. So literally, I knew nothing about taxes. I knew nothing about leases. I didn't even know what a quarterly tax payment was. I didn't even make any quarterly tax payments. Like, I don't think the entire first year. I didn't have any accounting software. I just knew this is what I sold, and this is how much cash was left over in the register at the end of the day.
Did you start a business did you form a corporation back then, or did you just start selling it?
Sam, I didn't do anything, literally.
Wow.
I mean, I had a name on it. That's just how ignorant I was at the time. That's one of those where, God was just looking out for me. But, I was right in between Louis Vuitton and Coco Chanel at the Royal Hawaiian Shopping Center. So it's a great spot, great traffic. But anyway, that started, it kind of took off really like from day one. And then I ended up getting a beach chair and umbrella concession at the Halekulani, had that going. Then I got these tri-bikes, bought these tri-bikes that dudes ride around taxis at night with all the drunk people.
Yep.
And I was doing all of that and still, bar backing and bartending at night, at the club.
Sleeping like 3 hours. That's it.
That was it. But the funny thing is I'll bring this home quickly. So I started that business and of course fell in love with my girlfriend. She was at Chaminade, I was at UH, and she was 4 years older than I was. So fast forward, a few years in, I got this business. I don't know, I'm thinking I was probably doing, $7,000 a week, at 17, 18.
That's pretty good. That's great back in the 80s.
Yeah. And then the concession came in, and then that was bringing in another 3,500, $4,000 a month.
Right.
On the, because I just got a cut for doing all the labor on that. But, I was putting, 5 or 6 grand, in my pocket every month, at 17, 18, thought I was the richest man in the world.
Right. Absolutely.
So long and the short of it, my girlfriend is going on to law school, and she's from California. She's going to Stanford. She gets accepted. She's headed to Santa Clara. And I'm puppy dog loved. Yeah. And she's like, move to California, and I'm like, no, I've got my business. I get out on the weekends. We do bonfires, Kahlua Pig, Lao. We would just have a blast. She leaves, and then it took me about 5 months, and finally I was like, okay, I'm going to move to California. I'm selling.
Yeah.
And today is comical, right? Because I did no valuation. I didn't know what the business was worth, had no clue. The guy that I rented the kiosk from looked at he said, what are you doing? He's like, you got financials? It's like, no. It's like, I've got all the register receipts. I can show you what I'm selling. And so he stole it from me, right? I think I sold that for like 45 grand. It was probably worth 200 all day long.
Wow.
Right. But I had no clue. I didn't know. And I was thinking that's all the money in the world at the time. Right. I was like, 19, 20 years old, so it just goes to show you, I made all of the mistakes that people make at 17, and they make them at 25 or 35 or 45. Not being adequately capitalized. I wasn't. Not knowing the business. I didn't. Not having a clue why I was doing it other than, hell, I hope this works.
Yeah.
What other mistakes? I didn't know how to read a lease. Didn't know the terms and conditions. Didn't really know what I was signing up for. Didn't make my quarterly estimated tax payments. So of course, you guys know that came back to haunt me.
Yep.
Hawaii and everybody else was looking for their money.
Oh, yeah, I guarantee it. Did you paid them back? All right. You got through all that?
Yes. Luckily, I had enough. I had enough money that made it all work. But I made every dumbass decision you could make. And somehow, just by the grace of God, I got out of there alive and, did well. So it was one of those cases where you think you're good at something, right, and you're just really a happy idiot. You're a lucky idiot. And that's basically what I was. So that's kind of how it started.
That's a great story.
That was my very first business.
So let me ask you this. So you got to have your why. We have to establish that. obviously you want to know what kind of sector you want to go into. Three sectors: of franchise business, your own self, or corporation kind of type. Is that right? Those three?
Yes.
Out of those three, after you determine that and you kind of start your business plan, right? And like you said, a business plan needs to be just, it could be a one pager. It could be really, really simple, right? If somebody's going for, I guess before I get into that question, all right, so I've got what I want. What's the next steps do I do?
So, so Sam, today, you've got different types of structures for a business as far as operating entities and tax. So your vanilla, plain Jane, super simple is a sole proprietorship, which is just you. You don't do anything other than get a DBA. So it's, Sam Gillison, DBA, doing business as. You do the company, you sell, you buy, you put everything on a Schedule C at the end of the year, and all the profits and losses pass through to you, which is super simple. A lot of people do that with like home-based businesses.
So a DBA is doing business as.
Doing business as.
What's the Schedule C?
That's just a IRS tax form. So when you do your normal 1040 and you file out, you have all these schedules for other types of income. And a sole proprietorship, basically everything that happened in that sole proprietorship would be reflected in the Schedule C. So I made $100,000. It cost me $75,000 in expenses. I have net profit of $25,000, and that's what your tax basis is going to be on. So I don't like those for the biggest reason is that when you are a sole proprietor, all of your personal assets are at risk. So if anything were to happen inside the company and you're a sole proprietor, there is no corporate veil. There is no LLCS corporate C corporation separate entity to go through. They can go right after you. They can get judgments on your home, your cars, your accounts, your just about everything other than some retirement accounts, depending on how those are shielded. So, so you have a sole proprietorship, then you've got an LLC, limited liability company, corporation. And inside of that, you get professional partnerships like law firms, accounting firms, medical practices. And an LLC is basically, it's a separate entity. So if I want to do an LLC to start my business, I would say, okay, I am Steve and I own this business, quote unquote, I'm starting it, but I'm creating an entity, and the entity, like Platinum North, is the brokerage firm. So it is its own entity. So it's its own legal body, it's its own taxing body, but it needs management, somebody to make a decision for it, because it can't speak for itself. So that's where your membership in an LLC, a limited liability corporation, partnership, that's where you would be. You could be a single member if you own it individually. If you own partners, you're going to have members. Another good thing about an LLC is that it does give you protection from liability. If something were to happen, you get a product lawsuit, somebody who's driving your truck that's putting in blinds, kills somebody, and he's drunk, and they won't get punitive and compensatory damages depending on the state, then, they can only go after the LLC. And then if you're a member, only your contributions into the LLC. So they can't come after you for more than you put in. Right. So that's what an LLC looks like. An LLC can also be, you can be an LLC, but take a tax status of an S Corp. So if you want to be a corporation, the biggest difference between an S Corp and an LLC can have an infinite number of members or partners. S Corps is limited to 100. So you only get 100, you cap it. The tax entity for an S Corp is same, it passes through, but instead of a Schedule C, it's a K1. And you'll get your K1 at the end of the year, which is basically the same thing. All profits and losses pass through. If you have multiple members, then you get your proportionate share of the taxes or the losses for the entity, the LLC. So that's probably what you see by and large for most small companies that are not into manufacturing or R&D, right? Or big, transportation companies, right? If you get into manufacturing, there's OSHA, ISOs, there's a ton of regulatory bodies that are over top of that. And in those cases, it really makes sense to be an S Corp or a C Corp. And if you're really big or planning to be really big or planning to go public, you need to be a C corp because you can't take an LLC public.
What about an Inc., like an incorporate?
Yeah, and so well, your S corp is by its name is going to be an Inc. as a corporation. C corp is going to be the biggest difference there is, when you get into a C corp, you have corporate taxes that sit on the top. So let's say you made $10 million as a corporation. After it was all said and done, the corporation is going to pay whatever the nominal rate is for the corporate tax. And then as you as a shareholder, a board member, whatever else you're calling yourself, you're going to get paid money, and then you're going to pay taxes on it additional too. That's why they call it double taxation. And that's why a lot of small companies don't form C corporations. They prefer an LLC or an S corp because you don't pay double tax, but like in an LLC, you basically have to pay your Social Security tax, right? Normally, like if you have a job, you'll see it's about 15.4, 15.5%. The company will pay 50% and you pay. And that goes up to, I think it's like 140,000 now. And then over 140,000, it caps out. You don't pay any more SSN. Gotcha. So the biggest difference there is just, really accounting. You can do a little more things with like defined benefit programs and some other stuff with S corps. But unless you plan on having a large number of employees, let's say 25 or 30 employees, LLC really, it works. And there are different types of states. Wyoming's a good one. Nevada used to be, it's getting a little hairy. Delaware's the most famous, Delaware LLCs, people incorporating in Delaware. Those are because those states have been around a long time and there's a lot of precedent law. So they've seen a lot of cases. So that's why a lot of people go, and the states are friendly to businesses. So for liability reasons, if you have, jurisdiction and a contract, it's going to be in a friendly state for you.
So let's say, for example, so if you were like open or starting an e-commerce platform or something that didn't require bricks and mortar, then you would recommend using one of those states. But obviously, if you have a bricks and mortar, could you still use one of those states and still open up as a
sure?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can. And the cool thing is it's kind of like a Russian nesting box, right? So depending on, and I've had different businesses going at the same time. So different types of businesses going at the same time. Right. So if you're going to be in real estate or you're going to own real estate, an independent singular LLC is a good way to go. So if like I own my properties through one LLC, and so all of my real estate is just in one LLC. And so all the liability and everything else just sits there. And with real estate, it works for real property. If you're doing an e-commerce business, it doesn't really matter. I like, states to form LLCs where the costs are low. Because like in an LLC, you don't have to keep books, minutes, and records like you do in an S corp or C corp. Although I say you should, always, because the better your paperwork, the better your communication. And then eventually you always have to look down the road when you start a business, the nature and the journey that the business goes on. Because the business that you start, if you're successful or even moderately successful, wildly successful, it's going to grow. And so it's going to mature just like a child does. So that child at 5 is different at 10, it's different at 15, it's definitely different at 20. Your business is going to be that way. So you have to really think about it in dynamic terms. Like when you do your business planning process and you think about what you want this business to become, it's just like raising a child, right? In this case, the LLC or the company is the baby, and you're just trying to do all you can to make sure you raise the greatest kid ever, right? Or build the greatest business ever.
Good analogy.
But that business will change. Yeah. A big problem that people run into when they start a business is they're inadequately prepared financially. They have not run business models or performas. They haven't modeled the business out. And when you don't do that, you don't know when trouble's coming, and you probably don't know you're in trouble until it's too late. And so you can't take any course corrections, right? So one of the things when you start a business that I always encourage people to do, and if they can't do it, hire someone, doesn't matter. look at your business, rip it apart, look at the economic model. The economic model drives the business model, not the other way around. You don't come up with a business model and then land on the seashore of economics.
Yeah.
Doesn't work that way.
That was a question.
Economics drive what type of business you can run,
Yeah.
not wish to run or hope to run.
Right.
And the only way you know through that is financial modeling, revenue forecasting, and then where you look at worst case scenario, most likely scenario, and best. So you've got three models that should layer on each other when you start a business or run a business. And those should be updated and reviewed on an annual basis, if not quarterly.
Hey, Steve, one question that I had, so you talk about all these different, structures and, types of business, how do you recommend that people, either who do they consult with or what information is best to consider in order to determine what type or formation of business that they should start?
So, the holy trinity in business, your CPA, you got to have them, right? Your attorney and your banker. You got to have all three. There's a panoply of different types of consultants, subject matter experts, depending on what industry you're in, what field you're in. An underutilized resource for people that, are starting, and they're starting up their business on a budget. Hopefully everyone is. Even if you had a ton of money to throw away, why would you throw it away? And if you could throw it away, why not put it in highest and best use and let someone actually benefit from it? Right. So those three counterparties, if you will, are critical to start a business and operate and run a business. But you think about, there's 10,000 people every day turning 65. And if you look at the useful life and the quality of life, the cognitive capabilities, physical capabilities of that generation of people turning 65, they probably have another 25 years of high productivity, not the whole demographic, but a good swath. And they're looking for people. I mean, some of the best advice I've gotten and continue to get are from guys that I do annual meetings with, reunion meetings from almost every company I've been with ex-CEOs, ex-board members. And and they're all in their 70s, and I'm the young cat in the room in my 50s, right? And they were all my bosses back in the day. And for some reason, they're kind enough to invite me every year, come down and play golf and hang out and go on trips. And they will have forgotten more information than I'll probably learn in a lifetime. And so when you go into business, it's important. You can call them, mentors. You can call them advisors. You can call, a board if you wanted to. These are people that you might not even know, but you can reach out to AARP. You can reach out to retiredprofessionals.gov. There's a bunch of sites you can go to. You can find really good quality people that will give you a beautiful education for nothing. They don't want any money. They don't need any money. They just want to feel useful. And particularly when you're young in your entrepreneurial career, not your age, but you haven't done it before, you need to bridge the gap. You need the generations beyond you and the generations behind you to be relevant in the now, because that's what most people don't do.
Right. We see that in commercial real estate. And what I mean is we have a really big gap in that, we've got a lot of folks that are, I'd say, over 60 years old in the commercial real estate business. And then we have a lot of folks that are probably under the age of 25 and 30 years old. We have that big gap between 30 and 60, because what happened was back in when the recession hit in 07, 08, 09, commercial real estate took the biggest hit. And so everybody found different careers. So we have this big gap in between there. I mean, luckily I'm in that gap. We worked through it, you know what I mean? But at the same token, we didn't have that consecutive mentorship that was coming along that we're getting it. And so we're getting a really big, the fall offs in commercial real estate, and then we're getting the tech driven stuff that we're getting now too, as well. Just on a side note, we talk about gaps, we talk about, having mentorships, if you're going to start a business, and then this is kind of one of the things I want to talk to about too, as well, as I kind of leeway into it, you've been around a lot of really successful people. You've met a lot of successful people, from CEOs, entrepreneurs, billionaires, Steve. You know what I mean? You're very well connected. What do you think? Can you name like one or two characteristics that you think that sets them apart from other people?
Uh, yeah, it's one of those. It's trying to identify like the secret sauce in Coke, right?
Right.
It's there, and sometimes it's almost a harmonic thing, right? You can feel people's energy when you meet them. Some people just, their aura, if you will, it's just like, wow, and there's all different types of levels, right? We all have our own megawatt, power plant inside of us, right? And then even scientifically, you have a harmonics, you have a vibration, you have hertz that you can, I can wire your body up and I can show you what hertz you're modulating at, right? So it's not like a voodoo thing. It's a real thing. We're one big electrical current. So some of the guys, I mean, there's guys like, there's a couple guys I've played golf with, like Bill Doré. He's massive. He's the only single person individual to take on Chevron in a lawsuit, Chevron Global, and win.
Oh,
right. He's a billionaire, and he did it on principle. So he spent $65 million in legal fees of his own money to prove a point, and they were one of his largest clients because Bill's company builds all the stuff that goes under the oceans.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
So anything that's down in an ocean or a oil well or the grid, you're piping oil all across this country and all the others. Well, Door Construction, that's what they do. So, and it was all about some land he bought in Louisiana on a hunting preserve that was like 6,500 acres, and Chevron had polluted the site and they didn't want to do a cleanup, and he took them to court.
Even though they were his customer, really, when you think
Yes,
was
his third largest customer.
Oh wow, his
Yes.
third largest customer.
Yeah.
Think about that. Chevron's your third.
You need me, I don't need you.
Yeah,
Wow.
crazy. So, but anyway, and so Bill's he's a, little guy, still in shape. He's 75, 76, plays golf 3 times a week, works out every day. But, the X factor in him, Scott Floor is another guy that, is great. Just great president. They were great at threading the needle by exuding great leadership. They didn't need to be the smartest guy in the room, but they were extraordinarily curious, and they had a great way of asking very pointed questions. And if you think about it, right, the value of a person, if you put a whole bunch of people in a room, the most valuable people in that room, where you're starting a business or operating an NGO or a nonprofit, it's the people that can ask the most salient questions. They see everything. They introduce the questions that matter, not the chatter.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people that have answers, they chatter, but it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? So one thing that I have found is that I don't know if it's an innate ability or if it's, just experiential knowledge over time, or just because they're so curious, they're well read, they're very broad. They're really not, specialists, they're generalists. And that general curiosity of lots of things lead them down the road where they can engage people where they are, but more importantly, however their brain works and however they've mastered the art of asking good questions, pushes the ball forward, right? They look at things in a way that other people don't, and the questions basically bring an environment that doesn't yet exist into the now. And if you think about running a business, that's what it is. If you're in the military and you're planning a strategy, right? You're thinking about all of these things that have to happen for this, battle to work in theater and for us to come out on the other side. That's what really good questioning is. So
let me ask you this. So just kind of on that topic, because I love this topic anyways. So let's take Elon Musk, right? you talk about an innovator and what he's doing, whether you like him or you don't like him. I mean, the guy's probably 50 years ahead of everybody else as far as his imagination and what he's doing, right? An innovator. You know, the thing that you look at when you're starting a business is it, unless you invent or generate something that is just a big necessity for human development or human need, right? Uh, is it best to be the first out to market, or do you think it's best to sit back, wait, and be second to market? I mean, what's your thoughts on the coming to market and getting out there and educating your customer?
All right, I'm going to put my financial hat on.
Yeah, got you the green visor. Hang on.
So here's the thing. Right. So in any industry or business, you have incumbents, right? That, have already chopped up market share. And depending on what industry you look at, that share market globally, regionally, nationally has been aggregated, right? And so a handful of companies own the bulk of the market share. So example, in the world of medical devices, the field that I was just leaving, right? 4 companies own 80% of all of orthopedics on the planet Earth, just 4. So that means every other company formed on planet Earth is fighting over 20%.
Jeez.
That's it. So 4 companies. And then of course you look at all the med device companies, there's a ton of them, right? That's just one. In media is the same way. There's 3, maybe 4 companies that own all 90% of all world media. That's internet, radio, TV, everything. It's only 4 companies. They're all Russian nesting boxes. You see their labels and their brands, but they're all owned by 4 companies. So when you talk about being first to market, and Elon Musk is an interesting example. And this is my financial hat, right? You can go and be first to market if you have lots of cash.
Yeah.
If you have lots of money and you've already made it and you don't need to work for a living, first to market is great, right? It's because you think about it, you have to persuade all of your potential customers and then society in general that what you're doing is relevant and that you're actually moving the ball forward and you're really solving a problem, right? You're not creating a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. And when you do something new, that's how most people look at it, right? Like right now, I'll give you an example. First to market, right? This is great. Internet's 40 years old. And people think, oh God, if I was only around in the 90s, it'd have been great. Well, look, so think about from 1980 to 1990, the internet existed, but was very nascent.
Yeah.
Okay. In the 90s, from 90 to 99, it was somewhat relevant, but it was not entrenched in society. It was still, some people had a DX250 and dial-up connection and had the old, but so that was all through the 90s, right? And then we went through the dot-com bust because it just basically was like, oh, bourbon.com, that's got to be it. That's the one.
Yeah.
It's a $1 billion company, right? So if you take the 80s and 90s out, your internet's only been around 20 years. Okay. And so we're already at a turning in the internet. So the 20 years that the internet has been around, it's permeated all industries, right? So there's 11 industries in the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones, right? Different industrials, financials, cyclicals, transportation. Every single one has been hit by the IoT, Internet of Things. So, electricity's been around 120 years.
Yeah.
Like electricity. TV's been around 70 years, right? So we're in the nascency, right? So a first mover business right now, okay, DeFi, Web 3.0. So that's a whole nother extension that's going to take the internet as we know it today, and it's going to obsolesce what we know is the internet. Right. What we're doing right now and just now, all is about to change. And Web 3.0 is going to change everything again.
Is that, when you say Web 3.0, is that like the metaverse? And are we talking about stuff like that? Is that, I don't know.
Metaverse, decentralized finance, DeFi. If you look at just a population of occupations, most of your most talented engineers that built the Googles, that built the Amazons, that built Microsoft are all migrating into engineering and developing in Web 3.0. So it's, .eth, right? So it's instead of a .com, you're going to have a different end, but basically that thing's being set up and wired up for decentralized finance, instantaneous financial transactions. It's taking the repositories of information, like in the old days when we talked about, hey, we're going to scan the Library of Congress and then everything's going to be on. Well, the next generation of that, when you get into Web 3.0, it's completely different. Now you're talking about getting rid of it. So for real estate, for example, so a DeFi app that's going to be coming down the road is going to basically eliminate title companies. And so you're going to see title companies as we know them either go out of business or adapt, because soon all of those titles that have been filed sitting in all the courthouses across the world, those are all going to be put on a DeFi app, and they're going to be a part of a blockchain inside of a smart contract. And so you won't need, so your title will be verified in a blockchain in Web 3.0, and it's cradle to grave. It has all the information.
So that if in that scenario,
title companies will be obsolete.
Right. So that in that scenario, all right, let's just take title companies, for example. They go into the DeFi network. You still need an attorney to look over the closing statements and documentations, right? Or will it do it automatically?
Smart contracts already embedded. So once you do the validation, so you got third-party trust, just like you buy something on Amazon through a third party, you've got a person that covers the transaction inside of it. When you get into title and you get into legal, well, once I put it into a smart contract, now I've created a box, a lockbox. So everything for that title from now until it, into eternity is not going to change. It's the only thing that's going to change is someone else with a smart contract will buy that. Then it'll be transferred from one smart contract to the other inside the blockchain, and the chain never ends. And it always gets, so you'll be able to see right back from the origins, alpha to omega, where the title came in its original existence and where it goes. And you'll be able to do it in seconds.
Oh, wow.
I can think of a couple of title companies we've dealt with recently that I can't wait for that to happen too.
I mean, this is a little outweigh, but what I'm saying, first to market, to your question, first to market in the timeline we live in now, disruptive technologies take place. So they're born, they mature, and they die more and more quickly. Right. So when you're in a phase of global technological advancement, like we have been and will continue to be, things change far. I mean, they change faster than we can keep up with. And I say that in a business context, so that you used to could start a business and have a predictable curve of how long the business was, all of those good things. Well, as we move into the future, you really have to build dynamic business models. You can't be really tied to what you think your business is going to be, because you don't know what changes, societal changes, tokenomics, when we start talking about tokens and exchange and stable coins and all, these things aren't going away, right? I mean, people think, oh, that'll never happen. You got a lot of junk that sits out there, but in reality, those things are they're like, crypto's kind of like the word processor versus the typewriter, right? You had a typewriter and everybody had typewriters and you had NCR paper and you had all that stuff back in the old day. Then you went to a word processor, and then, oh boy, that was the next one. Then you went to, oh God, did Microsoft created this thing called Microsoft Word, right? And now it's information, how you transact business, and then the flow of currency and transactions, and how you trace and track the chain of custody of transactions will continue to evolve and change and speed up. And as that happens, whatever business you're in, if you're transacting in something called commerce, it has to be fairly dynamic.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, do you have an opinion on how someone that's starting a business today in a quickly and even quicker potential evolving, society can almost future proof their business when it comes to, how fast things have changed recently and where they're headed?
That would be great.
He would be
and if
talking
I
to
had
us.
that answer, I would not give it to you, Matt. I would sell it on the internet. I would send you to, hey, buythisidea.com. As close as you can come is this. If you enter a business and you enter it out of the philosophy, I would do this for free. Kind of deal, where it's like it's a passion and I love it. And if I can just wake up and break even doing this, I'm happy. Then, more than likely your passion is going to attract more business than you need. It really will. It's just at some point, right? Passion runs up against reality and hours in the day. And, and eventually, even if you're the greatest artist in the world, like a comedian, if you have to be funny all the time, because that's what you get paid to do. Yeah. But when you started, you just love telling jokes and you love the stage. Then it becomes more of a burden, right? So future-proofing a business, the best thing you can do is run financial models. And when you run it and you say worst case scenario financial model, you run the economics, and then you do your, most likely, and you do your best case. If you look at it and you say, okay, worst case scenario, here's where I am. I'm starting here. Here's 3 years from now. Would you still want to be in that business in your worst case model 3 years from starting it? Right? Because that's a really telling answer that only you and the guy in the mirror looking back at you can answer.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you say, I've got, $500,000, I'm going to go invest it and start a business. And after 3 years, I'm going to be at my worst case scenario numbers, right? Which is going to tell you what this is Armageddon, in my opinion, right? And can I do it for 3 years? And then if the answer is still yes, then okay, great. All right. So you're good. Now, if you get that far, then you start to figure out, okay, how will I address the revenue shortfalls or the issues in the business to get it from worst case to most likely case, right? Because at most likely case, right, same business, just different margins, different customer, different price point, but you have a number. And then best case, you got another number. So like if you think median, and mode, you get back just general statistics, the blending of the three, right, will probably get you close as long as your business comps are solid, right? Meaning that if you're going into a space that someone's already into, you should be able to, and it should be, requisite, you should be required to start your business to do this, go out and go find real world examples of the 3 burger joints that are your best case, your most likely, and your worst.
Yeah.
They're all in the same business and they're all doing 3 things, right? They're all arriving at 3 different endpoints doing the exact same thing. And that will help you, because what that will do is it will make this, stuff you can't touch, it'll make it real, right? And then you go in and you find out. And then most likely, there's a great book called, Buy Rather Than Build, which is basically a case study on why you should just go buy a business, not start a business. Right? Because out of those 3, I can go find the 3rd guy that's in the worst, and I can go buy his business
and make it better. And
already know he's already there, and now I can go, right? And I don't have to wait 3 years to figure out if am I going to be down there on the worst case scenario. Right. So a lot of times I'll tell people, have you really investigated just looking at buying a business, right? Something that's already out there in a space that you want to be in, versus you just want to manufacture or conjure something out of thin air.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, researching and buying versus build, like what would you suggest someone that is wanting to start to do the research? Like how do they go about doing that? Do you just jump on the computer and Google, or do you pick up the phone and call people? What questions they ask? What's the best way to start?
I'll tell you a couple of businesses that I started. And this is, there's some internet involved and everything else. The The problem about with internet and Google is that, you know, it in theory, it democratizes information, right? It makes information accessible to everyone. But what people, you know, their fatal mistake is taking information or facts and turning it into knowledge. Right? I can Google everything right now on quantum physics.
Right.
I mean, like, yeah, you want to answer that quantum physics? Yeah, I got that. Hold on a second. There it is. Now I'll give you that. And now, you know, is that information or is that knowledge? And then even more importantly, is it knowledge or is it wisdom?
Yeah.
Right. If I'm going to get paid in two coins, one's money and one's knowledge, I'm going to take the knowledge first.
Right.
Because if I'm knowledgeable, I can repeat it. Right. If you give me some money, you can take it away. And if I didn't know how to make it, it's probably not going to stay with me very long. So once you, you know, narrow your field of view on the industry or business that you want to get involved in, then go do what every business owner always needs to do. Go shake hands, go knock on doors, go meet people. There's nothing you can ever do that's going to replace just the sheer ability and skill set, hard skill set of tenacity. And tenacity is, I'm going out and I'm going to go meet people that actually do this. I'm going to, you know, take my pride and my ego down, and I'm actually going to say, I need help. I would like to talk to you about your business. I'm thinking about getting into something like this or buying this type of a business. And before I make major mistakes and put my family at risk and take my kids out of school, you know, can I buy you lunch and will you spend 30 minutes with me and talk to me?
Right. Let me
Number one, if you can do that, you're probably already well on your way of running a good business. If that scares you and you can't do it, don't go into business. Just don't do it.
Yep.
Because you got to be you've got to be your number one people connector.
That's right. I agree 1000%. So let me ask you a question about business. So we talk a lot about the internet. We talk about the standard ways of starting a business. Now we're starting to see these NFTs, these metaverses, buying real estate. Like someone spent $450,000 to be Snoop Dogg's neighbor in the metaverse, right? You know, so we're going to start seeing businesses in the metaverse and people setting up shops in there. What's your thoughts on that? And do you think that's kind of where the future is going?
All right, I'm going to do a disclaimer.
Okay.
You know, I'm not an you know, NFT non-fungible token guy. Right, but I did sleep in the Holiday Inn Express.
Okay.
But in all seriousness, the way I look at business and I look at the metaverse and I look at NFTs, fractionalized ownership of assets, and that's really what you're talking about. What people, I think you always have to give people a primer. If you can't give someone an example of something, then when you talk to them about something, they'll do this and they don't understand a word you're saying.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you don't, it goes back to my whole thing. If you don't connect the dots, if you can't take the complex and make it simple, then get somebody who can.
By asking the right questions, right?
Yeah. Well, again, it's funny, right? It's so funny how like these same little things kind of keep coming back, no matter what you call it or where you are or what evolution of technology or commerce is existing, you know, like metaverse. So think about it this way. You can think about, in my mind's eye, when I look at NFTs, okay, exactly. An NFT is designed to transact ownership in something with a coin that is backed by a group of people that share in supply and demand of a coin. It's not money. It's not currency as we know it, right? It doesn't fluctuate as far as it's not pegged to the US dollar. Every currency in the world is pegged to the US dollar. US dollar is the global reserve currency. All petrodollars are in US dollars. That means all oil in the world is traded in dollars. And all loans, by and large, are made in dollars, country to country, or, you know, big, you know, private equity firms on down. And there's a reason for that, you know, and it has to do with, you know, currency volatility and devaluation and these things. So an NFT in the metaverse. So if you think about the metaverse is like, let's call the metaverse like a World's Fair, or the metaverse is Disney World. Okay. So everyone's probably, if you got kids, you took them down to Orlando or you went to Anaheim, you've been to Disney. So if you went to Disney World, right, and you bought a ticket, if you're a Florida resident, you got a discount, you stayed at one of the hotels, you went to Epcot, you went out to the cool new one, the Avatar, which is beautiful. And you're in a metaverse that just, it's a physical representation of a fantastical world, right? You're going to fantasy land, and inside of that fantasy land, people are exchanging money for things. Now, when you get to Disney, there's no cash.
Right.
You get the Disney card, you get the little reader and the RFID to track your kids. So all intents and purposes, that is a facsimile of the metaverse in real life. So you're going there for one reason. You want to be entertained. You want the fantasy, you want the Disney breakfast, you want to do the rides, you want to stay at the hotel, you want all the stuff. The metaverse is no different. It's just a virtual representation of Disney World. And so is that real? Yeah, because anything that someone is willing to pay for is real.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can argue about like the moniker or what you want to call it, but at the end of the day, I go to Disney World. I know it's not real. I know a cheeseburger doesn't cost $29. I know it does $10,000 for 4 days. That makes no sense. None. That you talk about stupid. But people go and you do it. I've taken the family and the kids, and so yeah. So the metaverse, yes. The question is, there's a certain adoption rate and a demographic that's more quickly adopting that, and they understand it. Just like NFTs or tokenomics, where you're talking about, all an NFT is a representation of token in an economic world that rests inside of its own little universe. Right. So it's basically air gapping technology, so you can't get hacked, right? If you're at Fort Meade or someplace where, NSA, where they don't want any waves coming in. That's what NFTs are, and that's what the metaverse is. So yes, can you form a business in the metaverse? Yes. Can you offer services in the metaverse? Yes. The question will be the incumbent players, like Amazon, who's going to be your third party trusted source for the metaverse, right? So obviously Facebook is doing it. Obviously some realty companies are doing it, like EXP. Those people go in, they volunteer their information, and they transact business, and they do that with a full acknowledgement that they're in a safe environment or a safe universe or a metaverse, because other people are there doing the same thing. And talk about crowd think. How many times you take somebody into the metaverse and then all of a sudden they see everyone else and they say, oh, this is a real thing. And it's like, yeah. And eventually you're going to have money and currency that you've earned inside the metaverse, like living next to Snoop Dogg and everybody else. Yeah. And it's going to be exchanged just as real. The only difference is that, in the metaverse is, it's product choice, right? Somebody loves an Apple phone. Somebody loves, an Android. Well, somebody will buy anything in the metaverse, and somebody wants to go to 7-Eleven and get a Slurpee. Same thing.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yes, it's viable.
But do you think it's too early, or let's say, for example, really, what could you open in the metaverse? I guess you could do an e-commerce. It ought to be e-commerce anyways, right? You're not selling anything tangible in there.
I guess you could open whatever you wanted to in there, as long as the business transactions stayed in the metaverse.
Yeah. Well, you think about the metaverse and you draw a fence around it, right? So if you're in the United States, right, you have the GDP of the US. Yeah. So you're going to have a GDP derivative economics, right, for a metaverse. Inside the metaverse, eventually, we don't see it now, but it'll happen just, through economics. You're going to see a GDP inside a metaverse. And that's everything that it's producing. It's gross domestic product inside the metaverse. Now, inside of that, you're going to have no different than we have now. You're going to have big players that are there, and they're selling everything from, life insurance to, annuities. They're having all their conversations. They're selling you virtual space. They may be selling you line time, inside the metaverse for certain events. Inside of that, they may have the, Adele or Billie Eilish, avatar pre-recorded concert, one and only, and you're going to get your $300 tickets to go to that. And then you're going to have your own little private, booth over here to do it. And NFL and EA game sports will be on there to go to certain games. Then you're going to have a gambling clinic and a casino that sits inside the metaverse. And inside of there, you're going to do chips. And so you can visualize and see that all of these things are there. They're manifestations or representations of things that we already do. Because at the end of the day, the customer, the client, all of us, we decide what's valuable and what's not.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of things like, people that don't drink, they wouldn't give you 50 cents for a bottle of bourbon.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. Somebody else will say, I'll give you $1,000 for that.
Yeah. Even though MSRP is like $100.
There you go.
Yeah. Now we're talking about our world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like you need to figure out how to be like the Bugsy Siegel of Las Vegas in the metaverse, right? The guy that started that in Las Vegas.
Without all the violence, Matt.
Yeah.
And all the dead bodies in the desert. Let's
Well, hey, one of the many advantages of the metaverse.
That's what Facebook's doing, right? Mark Zuckerberg's doing that. That's really what he's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going down that road. And again, if but this goes back to business. A lot of people see things that take place or transpire, and you see them on the TV and you get the highlight reel. You have to always start off in a business to understand what's the representative investment, cash flow, and carrying cost of the business, right? There's a lot of things that theoretically are great, but they take a minimal amount of capital to even dream about getting involved in. So either you have to bring sweat equity in through hard skill sets or contacts or network, or you have to bring in hard cash, or you have to be able to raise hard cash to make those things viable. So the great thing about, the metaverse or any other little thing that's coming along, crypto, you don't have to like cash it all in. But what you do need is you need a base knowledge. Just tiptoe in, start to learn it, start to feel it, start to see it in a way that you don't see, right? Talk to people that are doing, either relatively well or they have a head start on you, and learn about it. And through that process, that distillation of acclimating yourself to a different view, a different world, different way of thinking, then let the business ideas come to you. Yeah. You can't just look at a magazine or see something on TV and say, oh yeah, I can do that. Yeah, you have to look at the underlying structures of what are the barriers to entry, what are the costs to entry, and then what are the carrying costs to a clear path to cash. Because at some point, that's where the rubber meets the road, and you have to hit all of those intervals. And if you don't, it's going to be, a really hard lesson and, probably a quick life for your business.
I got a kind of a pivot question. I get this question a lot, and maybe you can help answer this. If I'm a 1099, where I'm a salesperson or a 1099 employee, am I better off starting my own business and flowing my 1099 through my business to me, or am I better off just being the 1099 employee? What's your take on that?
So if you're a 1099, right? So you can be W-2 or 1099, and then there's so if you are independent contractor status, right? There are some, legislative laws that have been passed in the past few years for the gig economy. So there are some things that open up to you as a gig worker, as a 1099. Essentially, that's what you are. You're independent, and then you have to go to the marketplace for benefits, right? For retirement, for health insurance, for all of those things, asset liability, all the other goodies. So as a 1099, I used to know that ratio, but I mean, if you had a job as a 1099 and you had a job as a W-2 and was the exact same job with the exact same amount of remuneration or pay annually, you're going to earn out about 15-16% more money as a 1099, because you're going to be writing off all of the expenses that you incur to run as a 1099. As a 1099, I would still form an LLC.
Okay.
I would still, get as much as I can through there. I would open, a SEP, self-employee, pension program. You can do SEPs, you can do, IRAs, but a SEP basically allows you to put 20% of whatever the profit is in the business away in a tax deferred account. So you fund your own retirement. And then if you do that, and then you put another $6,000 or $7,000 in an IRA, and then you do a couple of other little things, you can put, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year of tax deferred income away.
Really, with a SEP?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you'd start a business if you're a 1099, run it through there, and generate a SEP.
Yeah, I would still do an LLC, little simple LLC. And then you can go to Fidelity, Charles Schwab, there's a whole bunch, and say, hey, this is my business. This is what I do. I want to maximize my retirement account. Please let me know what you have. And they have a basket of stuff. So they have insurance. They have, I'm thinking right now, probably 4 or 5 great structures to defer taxes and to increase your retirement. And then inside of that, there's all sorts of stuff wherever your municipality or state is. Go to floridastate.gov and type in, independent 1099 contractor, what benefits do the states allow, and what type of programs and incubators and innovation labs do you have? Because they have all sorts of stuff that you can go after.
Wow, that's great information. So I know we've been talking for a while. I could probably talk for another hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yes, absolutely. We'll do it again.
No, definitely.
Hope so.
So let me ask you this then. So
it's kind of a lot to put a bow on.
I know it is. It really is. Right.
Hey, that's business, right? I'll tell you, your head's swimming.
I could ask more questions. We could be here for another hour, and I don't want to, take too much of your time. But
yeah,
go ahead. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Platinum North and what you guys are about. Go ahead and give us a little bit, kind of,
sure,
what you guys are doing, and just a little bit about Platinum North.
Yeah, I'll give the promo reel. So we're based in Destin, Florida. And we do business brokerage and real estate advisory. So essentially, if you think about it, we're an eHarmony. We have a buyer bank and a seller bank, and we try to do our best to match buyers and sellers at its most simplified form. Inside of any brokerage that you would go to, people always swallow when you're like, well, what do you guys charge? Well, we charge 10% for the sale of the business. And then they start, I'm in the, Indian Bazaar and we're negotiating, like, no, this is what we do. There's a scale, we sell businesses, north of $100 million and as small as, $1 million. There's a sweet spot in there for everybody. But at the end of the day, and I had this conversation, just 2 days ago with a guy who's been in business for 25 years, great business, doing a little over 1.1 million in EBITDA, or seller discretionary earnings, which is just simply, that's how much money he's made every year after the business costs. We basically work on deal structures. So when you sell a business or buy a business and you're in it, you see different ways to build a bridge that an individual seller doing I want to sell it by myself, or I don't want to pay somebody for their professional advice. And which is always if you ever find yourself saying that, just stop yourself. But, that would be just like saying, doc, I really don't want to pay you for the surgery. You just tell me how to do it. I'm going to go home and do it myself. I can replace my own knee.
Yeah.
You would never do it, right? You would never do it. But people in some of the biggest, if not the biggest transactions of their life will get wrapped around the axle on an insignificant amount of money. And I'll tell everybody, write down the number you think you're going to get by yourself. Just write it down. You go put it in the lockbox. I'm going to write a number. We're going to put it in the lockbox, and we will not open these until I bring you a qualified buyer for your business. And then when we close and everything's done, let's open them up and let's look at them.
Yeah.
So a big piece of it is helping people understand what the process looks like, walking them through it, galvanizing, their intent. Because a lot of people that want to sell a business or buy a business, the longer the process, they can get a little bit more wishy-washy. And the seller or the buyer, in our case, believe like, oh God, like we're there. Like, look, I can spend my time anywhere. We've got a big funnel of people coming in. So the only way I get paid is if you actually win. If I can't sell your business or find you a business to buy, I get paid nothing for my time, right? Or my associates' time, or my infrastructure, or legal, or the marketing package, and so on and so forth. So basically what we try to do is match up our buyers and sellers, and we build out profiles on people. Sellers can go in and, this is what I want to do, and we'll talk through them, and I'll make sure that they want to do it. A buyer comes in and says, I have this amount of money. I have been pre-approved for this. And so here, I need a business between $2 and $5 million.
Right.
We do SBA. We have several banks, so we're an SBA preferred lender. We don't lend the money, but our valuation packages, when we go into value a business, will pass the sniff test, and the banks will fund the deal based on the valuations that we create for a potential buyer or seller. And then we do all sorts of stuff. We connect the dots for people when they're moving out of a business and they want to go into a Delaware statutory trust, a DST, or a 1031. We don't do that. We farm that out to other people that are far better than we are at doing it. But basically, if you just walk through it, Sam wants to sell his business, calls Steve, says, Steve, I want to sell my business. Great. I say, okay, let's talk about it. I'll do an introductory phone call. I'll walk through, and I'm kind of pressure testing and pushing your points of like, why do you want to sell? How good are your financials? How many sisters, daughters, and kids are on the payroll that don't work in the business, right? Because, because what people that do it on their own, the DIYs, don't understand, if you can't recast financials, if you can't tell a story, if you can't back it up with real hard numbers, you're not going to get a buyer. And that's why 8 out of 10 businesses that list don't sell.
Yeah, that's an interesting figure. And we talked about this briefly, in the past too, so you talk about, starting a business, the type of business that makes the most sense as far as a formation, and then, throughout the business life cycle, things that make sense to and not to do. So when you're exiting, when you're talking to people that think that they may be interested or, or have thought about exiting, I mean, how do you consult them, whether they feel like they're ready to sell, they have their books in order, don't have their books in order? I mean, what does that conversation look like? Or maybe what have you experienced in your, personally?
Yeah. So what I try to do is, when you look at a business, the first thing we do out of the gate is we do evaluation. We never ask. I don't say, how much do you want to sell your business for? It's immaterial. People think whatever they think. But at the end of the day, I bring a qualified buyer to buy a business. The market sets the price. So sometimes you're in a hot, like right now, certain businesses, the multiples are literally, you can get a 3 or 4x multiple above historical norms for a business now. So in that case, you probably want to sell now, because you're probably never going to get, I will probably never be able to bring you a buyer that's willing to pay this amount of money. But typically what I do, we do evaluation. And to do that, we get a balance sheet and financial statements, right? Last 3 years are great. And then we have to do some math magic because of 2020 with COVID, and we have to smooth some stuff out. And then sometimes they're really clean. They're buttoned up financials. Maybe they have a good CPA and attorney. They're really good. Some people mix and muddle personal and everything else. And they have a lot of things that are coming out of the company that makes the company not look profitable. We have to tease that information out, recast financials, build those up, and then do a promo package or a business package. But that's kind of my first sniff test. And I'll spend typically, a couple of hours on that meeting and that conversation. And then I'll get a feel for, is it a business I can move? Yeah. We're a little different than some brokers. Our litmus test is we only do 90-day listings. Most brokerages are 12 months or 6 months. If I can't look at the business and do evaluation, and if I can't move it in 90 days, move on to the next guy. We'll eat our losses because our funnel's basically built on a 90-day model, forward-looking quarters. So that's a little different. It puts more pressure on us to have really good qualified buyers.
When does that clock start ticking?
After the valuation are done and the financials are verified, and we get a signature to list. So, but between listing and LOI, typically it's 90 days for us. That's not the norm. So anybody on this, podcast, but most of the time it's going to be 6 to 12 months because you're going to have, $5,000 to $15,000 in your marketing package by the time you're done. And you got lots of people touch it. You've got all the labor, you've got the review. We do the bank review. We do the SBA verification, the preferred lenders. I mean, so you have to go through the process. So the more buttoned up the process, the more efficient it is. But at the end of the day, I don't want to sit on a business and market it for 12 months, because if that happened, I made a mistake, and that's my bad, not the seller. I did not give you a valid price, or I didn't know the business well enough to know that this thing's not going to move, right? It's not going to, if you want it to move quickly, then this is your price. If you're willing to hang on and do some things, then rather than a listing agreement, let's set this thing up for sale. And 18 months from now, we'll do a listing, but I'll give you a roadmap, and now the consulting hat will come on, and we'll go in and we'll either quarterback, we'll give you a plan, ready to go, do these things, or we will sit in and help you on a quarterly basis get there so that you're ready in 18 months to maximize your value on a multiple basis. But you've got to know that going in, and that's why the valuation is so important. And then also tagging the mark to market, current interest in a business. Some businesses, they may be great, but you can't get anybody to buy them, right? I mean,
too niche
because they're very specific. They're very niche.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, I tell you what, Steve, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us on our podcast.
Thank you for having me, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey,
thanks for the bourbon, man. I can't wait for the next round.
Well, I was going to just say after that well or 12, the beginning, and maybe we should, turn it around. You send us one.
You send us one.
I will. If I podcast it, I'll send you something fun anyway. How about that?
No, I'm just.
No, let's do this again. This has been really, really educational. I can't thank you enough for joining. We really, really, really enjoyed this.
No, you guys are doing great. I'm happy. I'm happy you're doing this, and I hope this reaches plenty of ears, because believe it or not, this is the waterfall. The drop that starts the waterfall.
Yep.
With one drop, this is what it is. And if you can just save a handful of people from themselves early on, it really does make a difference. I mean, that's why I say I like connecting the dots, because this is one of those things where a lot of people don't realize it, but this is a community that you live and thrive in, and you have an opportunity to do some good every day.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's tangible. It's you can really, even if the people you're helping don't know it themselves, you know it only because you've been down that road. So I think what you guys are doing is phenomenal.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Well, until next time, Steve, we really appreciate it.
And cheers, my friend.
Cheers. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. 100 years, boys.
100 years.